We started last week to look at the system of the mystical nature of the Aleph Bet, because they also represent these patterns in a deep way. But the added bonus is that if we were to fully understand the representation of every letter, we would actually be able to derive the meaning of any word we see in Hebrew. So we said that the Aleph Bet, so on the deepest level, the deepest sources say that whenever we look at, if we look at Bereshit, right, for example, if we look at Genesis, whenever God creates something, he speaks, let there be light, let there be earth. So the idea being that he actually used the language, the Hebrew language, as the tool for creating the universe. And so I said last week that if you were like Neo in the last scene of The Matrix and all of a sudden you can see the whole thing in code, you would recognize that table is actually made up of the word shulchan, right? It's not separate. It's not divorced from the word. In other words, we typically think of language as an arbitrary sound that we associate with an object in real life. Here it's the other way around. It's the sound, it's the word itself that creates the object. And so, as a result of that, you'd be able to see the letters as the DNA of the word itself. Come on in, you're just going to need a chair. How you doing, Sammy? So, we gave some examples of this. I also added a condition last week, which is, sometimes I speak about gematria or I speak about the mystical nature of the Aleph Bet, and people say, okay, how can you prove it? Maybe it's like a nice parlor trick, right? That these things seem to add up together. And my answer to that was, I'm not trying to prove this, right? This is the cherry on top. This is a way of showing the beauty of the system, but it's not necessarily a way of proving the system. It happens to be that if you see enough examples of this, you start to say, well, this is a bit freaky, right? That this works so many times. That every time you consistently see the letter Aleph, it means the same thing in every single situation. Okay, so for fear of backtracking, so what we did do is we introduced these letters last week, and we said that every letter you can determine the meaning of the letter based on its position in the Aleph Bet, right? What number it comes in. Its shape, right? The shape of the letter actually tells you something about the letter. Its sound, the sound says something about the letter, and its grammatical usage, okay? So last week we looked at the letter Aleph. Aleph is oneness, obviously. It is the ineffable, because the true unity of all things is something that cannot be spoken about, and therefore Aleph is the only letter that makes no sound. We said that the shape of the letter Aleph, I'm going to do this just very quickly, is made up of a Vav and two Yuds, right? And the meaning being that the Yud is the most spiritual letter of the Aleph Bet. It doesn't actually touch the ground. It represents the number 10, something that is higher than the dimension, the plane of the single digits. And there's a Yud on the top and a Yud on the bottom that represents the spirituality that's found in the spiritual worlds and that which is found in the physical worlds. And the Vav, which is literally means a word. Anyone remember what the word Vav means in Hebrew? A hook, right? So the Vav is the connector word, letter, which is why in grammar, in Hebrew grammar, a Vav means and. It connects two words together, right? Exactly. And so therefore, you're connecting the Vav of the Yud of the higher realm and the Yud of the lower realm, and that's the unity that's represented in the letter Aleph. And then we also, of course, said that if you take the numerical equivalent of a Yud is a 10, another Yud is a 10, and a Vav is a 6, that equals to 26. And the significance of the number 26 is the four-letter name of God, right? Right, so you have God implicit, hidden in the letter Aleph, okay? So that's a very quick recap. We looked at some of the words that you can use to be able to figure that out. We looked at things like Amen, right? Should I do this again in 2 minutes? Why not? Okay, so if we look at the word Amen, we have the Aleph followed by a Mem, followed by a Nun, just because there's just a few extra people here today, right? So we said that the word Amen not only means I agree, but it means that I acknowledge that, I say it after a bracha, right, a blessing that you make. Now, an amen also comes from the word emunah, which means that there's something that's up there that I am going to manifest and bring out with me into my life, right? Doesn't mean belief, okay? Emunah does not mean belief. There's no word for belief in the Torah. So, amen also is the root for a word for an omen, which means an artisan. So what we said is that Aleph Mem Nun is actually the process of taking the Aleph, which is the ineffable oneness, that's that spark of, oh, I know that there's something deeper to this reality. The Mem, which is the 40th letter, right? If you look at your gematria chart, that's represented by the number 40. 40 in Torah, I'm sorry, I'm going very quickly because we did this last week. 40 in Torah always represents taking something spiritual and bringing it out into physical reality. So Moses was on Mount Sinai for 40 days. The Jewish people were in the desert for 40 years because they had to become a people, right? The Torah had to be brought down from a purely spiritual reality into a physical one. The flood covered the earth, or it actually rained for 40 days and 40 nights because the world had to literally be born again. And of course, in Talmudic literature, a child is only considered to be a real fetus after 40 days. Okay? There's other 40s as well. Like we said, with a mikveh, has to be a volume of 40, and that's because there's something, you're coming out as a created new being, right? As you come out of the mikveh. So 40 is always taking something spiritual and bringing it out into the physical world. So you have this aleph, you have this divine spark. Let's say you're an artisan, you have this idea. You bring it out physically into physicality. That's the mem. And then you have the final nun, which is the longest letter of the aleph bet, right? It's basically just a straight line. It represents the idea of taking something and doing it consistently all the way through. So you can't just be an aleph mem, you can't just take something once upon a time and turn it into something, right? You have to constantly be doing it. You have to be doing it all the time, which is why grammatically when you add a nun to the end of a verb in Hebrew, you go from being a sheker, right, is to lie, to being a shakran, which is a liar. Gezel, which is to steal, you're a gazlan, which is a thief. You're something, lomed is to learn, lamdan is a learner, somebody who does things all the time. And that's essentially the entire process of amen. You're taking, somebody makes a bracha, this like recognition that there's something spiritual in the world. You say, okay, I have that ineffable unity, oneness, but I have to actually make it real in my life. I have to live that way constantly. I can't just see that flash of lightning once and never return to it. I have to bring it out into physicality, and then I have to do it all the time. I have to do it multiple times. And that's amen. That's the process of amen. And that's also how an omen, that's how an artisan crafts something as well. So you can do that for literally any word if you knew every single letter and what it meant. Pretty cool. Okay, so now what I'd like to show you is the letter bet, and this is new territory. Okay, so the letter bet. Okay, here we go. That's a pretty letter bet. Now, what number in the alphabet is the letter bet? What are we up to, Ben? 2. Fantastic. So what is the letter bet going to represent?
2.
Two-ness. Okay. What is two-ness?
Partnership.
Partnership. Great. Good. So bet is the beginning of the possibility of relationship. Right? That's exactly what the letter bet is. So the letter bet, everything about the letter bet is going to represent the idea of connection. If you're a unity, you can't be connected to anything because there's nothing to connect to. You are you. Which, by the way, on a very, very, very deep level, is the reason why God cannot be evil. Because the only way that you can be evil is if there is an other to be evil to. But if he's entirely one, then there's nothing to be evil to. You are one with yourself. So there's no way to be evil. You are everything. Anyway. Yes?
Does that mean there's no possible way to be good either?
It means that, yes. Well, it means that on the deepest level, oneness, there's really very little we can say about it. But what it does mean is that permeating all of the things that seem to be broken up and disparate in the world, there is an underlying unity to it, which means that is kind of the definition of good, right? Good means connected. the word for evil in Hebrew, ra, resh ayin, shares a root with another word which is lehitroea, which means to shatter or to break up. And that's the reason why that is because the definition of evil is broken up, broken off from its source. That is evil. That's what evil is. So anytime anybody does an evil act, what they're doing is they're refusing to see the greater oneness. I will be cruel to you. I will do something selfish and egotistical for me because I'll refuse to see that actually what's good for all of us is good for me too. That's why the sound on Rosh Hashanah of the broken up notes is teruah. The resh ayin there is the root. It's the same root as evil because it's broken up. Okay? Okay, fine. Last digression. No, there will be more digressions, don't worry. All right, so we're at the letter bait, and bait always represents that deepest level of connection, the first essence of the ability to create connection. Okay, good. Now, what is the closest relationship that you can have with an other?
Marriage.
Okay, let's be even more simplistic than that.
Siblinghood.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about on just the simplest, let's say, prepositional level. What preposition would be the simplest way?
Inside.
Inside or? Yes, that's one.
Oh.
Or with, right? Now, if you put a bet in front of a word in Hebrew, what does it mean?
It means in.
It means in or with, right? It means in or with. So the closest relationship that you can have with anything is with or in, right? And that's the bet because it creates connection. Now, how else can we see that the letter bet means connection? Well, I'm sure as some of you have guessed, the word bet means bayit, which means a house, which is that which takes two disparate things and makes them part of one unit, right? If I have a Coke can and a cell phone, that's not two-ness, right? But if all of a sudden, if I put the Coke can and a cell phone into a box, then I have two objects inside of the box, right? Now, there are two other letters in the Hebrew language that also represent two-ness. If you take a look at your gematria chart there, which somehow we didn't get the other 10 of them tonight. Are they? Oh, fantastic. Great. Gematria charts for everybody.
You get a gematria.
Do it! Great. Well done. Fantastic. Oh, and even my notes from last week. Here, you can pass those out. Go for it. Okay, so what are the other two letters that represent two-ness? A chaf. Ben, you're 3 steps ahead of everybody, man.
Wow.
Okay, so the other things that represent two-ness are chaf, which is the numerical equivalent of 20, right? That's the second number in the 10 digits. And then resh, which is the second letter in the 100 digits. So beis, chaf, resh, okay? Beis, chaf, resh is going to represent two-ness, and it's also going to represent, but it's going to represent it on a slightly different level because each layer that you get, it's a little bit further away. Now I'm going to show you something very interesting. If you haven't noticed this, the letters beis, chaf, and resh are actually quite similar to each other. And I'm going to explain to you what they actually represent, okay? So the word beis, what the mystics say is the way that you write a beis is you start from the top and then you go down and then you draw that basin there, right? So what this essentially means is you take this little thing here called the coats is the representation of that which points upward. That's where we start, okay? So you take this little point that starts in the spiritual realms and you're going to bring it down into the physical realm, that's represented by the basin on the bottom, but you're going to expand it even larger than what it was. So the original relationship between God and the rest of the world is something where you take this spiritual thing and you actually infuse the whole world with that. Now, just hold on, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. The second layer of that is going to be a chaf, right? Which is taking this thing, and instead of infusing it down here, you just make it like a carbon copy, right? And now, so this thing becomes very similar to this thing on the bottom. So it's less of an extension, right, into this physical world. It's only a mirror image. So this becomes like this. Now, Rachel, what happens when you add a chaf at the beginning of a word? Grammatically, what preposition is that?
Like.
Like. Good. So this is like this. Fantastic. All right. When you get into the 100 digits, it's already even further away. So you're going to have this thing at the top, just like you have here and here. It's going to come down, but it's only going to manifest itself in a tiny little point. So by the time you get to Reish, the 100 digits, it's just a mere echo of what these things were before. Okay? And a Reish is going to represent something else. It's going to represent the Rosh. But okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Now, anytime you see the words, any word that has the letters Beis, Chaf, and Reish in it, you can be rest assured that that is going to represent some sort of connection or flow. Okay? So let's take the word Beis, Reish, Chaf. What does the word Beis, Reish, Chaf mean? Barech means to bless, right? What's a bracha? What is a bracha? I give you a bracha. You should have lots of children. You should have lots of success. You should find the right person at the right time. Yeah? What's bracha?
Blessing.
Yeah, what is a blessing?
Something spiritual to appear in something physical. So I wish you should have, I don't know, good health.
Good. Okay, fantastic. Good. So, good. Now, so the simplest way is kind of like a well-wishing, you know. I hope you have success, right? Something like that.
The word that was in my head.
A well-wishing, yeah. Now, this becomes problematic. This becomes problematic because often in the Siddur, very often in the Siddur, we are blessing God. Baruch atah Hashem, right? We say that all the time. What are we wishing God? I hope you have lots of nachas from your children. what bracha does God need? Yeah.
It's logically a dangerous path if you wish attributes of God to change, because by his very nature,
Yes.
he is the most of everything.
Yeah.
Of
That's
God,
right.
That being good, as you said. And
That's right.
If he has the capacity to change, then he loses the nature of being infinite.
You got it. So this is really problematic. So what the sources suggest is the following, that the word bracha means flow, right? So if you could imagine that in this universe, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The law of nature of matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Bracha says, yes, in the physical finite universe that might be true. But if you take a tap and plug it into the spiritual universe, you can actually create more flow and more success and more of whatever it is that you're doing than would be possible in a natural way. Right? So, for example, when Isaac, Yitzchak, goes to the land of the Plishtim, and it says he planted one and he sowed, what's the word in Hebrew? He sowed 100 times. What? Yes, that means to plant, yes. But in Hebrew it says he planted one and he sowed 100. Right? Now it says he sowed 100 times. In Hebrew it says he sowed mea sha'arim. That's where that word comes from, right? Mea sha'arim. Right? So, in other words, it means he was far more successful than he should have been naturally. So when you wish somebody a bracha, what you're actually wishing for them is flow. You're wishing for them to that there should be a supernatural flow coming from somewhere else besides the physical universe, that you say, I want you to have more success than you should naturally have. I want you to have more children than you should naturally have, right? Whatever it is. Okay, so barech is literally the concept of flow or connection, right? It's taking something from one universe and bringing it into another universe, right? So that's this pipeline of two-ness that we're actually describing. Okay, the next one we're going to do is another word that is Beis, Reish, and Chaf. Well, oh, by the way, this word means something else, by the way. A barech is actually your knee. Berech. Very good, Sean, right? The berech. That's your knee, right? So what is your knee? Your knee is the thing that connects, right? There's two parts of your knee, and it has this connection between, this is also tunis, okay? It's also a brecha, which is a stream. It's a stream.
The car is like a pool.
Yeah, in modern Hebrew it's a pool, but in biblical Hebrew it's a stream, right? Which is literally the same thing, right? It's all flow. Okay. Now, if I take another word, I rearrange this Reish. What's that?
Bachor.
Bachor. What's the Bachor?
Boy.
Firstborn.
Yeah, first.
Bachar is to choose, isn't it?
What?
Bachar?
That Bachor.
Yeah, it's also a man as well.
Yeah, man,
Like
that's
a young man. Or
So a Bachor, I think, is with a chet. A Bachor is with a chet. But for example, Makat Bachorot, right? The death of the firstborn, Bachor is the firstborn. So why is that flow? What does that mean? That's the beginning of the parents' flow into the next generation, right? So that's that. Now, if you have another one, Reish Chaf Bet. What does Reish Chaf Bet mean? What?
distance.
That's with a chet.
Oh, is it?
Wait, what is it? Can't see the letter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Chariot. Reish
Does it say Rechev? I can't see the
Rechev. There you go. It's a vehicle. And it's a chariot is really what it is. In biblical Hebrew, rakevet. Hine rakevet. But in biblical Hebrew, it's certainly not a train.
Yeah.
It's a rechev, right? It's a rechev. It's a train. I'm sorry. It's a chariot. What does a chariot do? A chariot is the ultimate connector, right? It connects the rider with the horse. With the horse. The rider with the horse.
How?
That's what a chariot is, my friend.
Oh, I was thinking the chariot takes you from where you are to where you want to go.
Okay, that could be. Now, there are a few more iterations of this, but I think you get the idea, which is that the thing whose numerical equivalent is 222 is always going to represent two-ness, right? So every which way that you scramble around these letters, you're going to end up with a word that oozes two-ness and connection and flow. Okay? See how this is working? All right. Now, I don't know how much more to do of this stuff because I feel like if we do a couple letters and we get the picture, I could do this for 10 more classes, but I don't think that's what we're here to do. So Rachel's like, yeah, let's do 10 more letters, right? Yeah, okay, fine. Okay. Well, this is what I suggest that we do. There are a lot more things to do here, but I want to put a pause. I can for sure recommend. There's an excellent series on YouTube of a rabbi who has been teaching this far longer than I have and teaches it in a far better way than I do. And I'm very, very happy to put a link on a WhatsApp group that doesn't exist. I'm not sure how to give that to people, but what I can say is if you want to write this down, I would say look up Rabbi Marcus, Marcus, mystical letters, and he has an entire series there, about 10, 12 classes, and he is phenomenal. He teaches at Neve Yerushalayim in Jerusalem. He's excellent. He's the master. He's the person that I learned most of this stuff from as well. Okay. Rabbi Yaakov Marcus, you got it. Okay. Now, what I did say I would do, Rachel, this week is I would do a little bit more gematrias because there are people who seem to like that stuff. Okay. Now, again, as I said, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot itself says that gematria parperet la Torah, which means that gematria is simply an appetizer for Torah. It means that this stuff is not. I see a lot of people getting really obsessed with gematrias and Bible codes and stuff like that. And it's like, you could spend your time doing that, but that's like eating the appetizers and not really going for the main course. The main course is wisdom, deep ideas, beautiful concepts. This stuff is the icing on the cake. This is the thing that shows you the beauty of the system. So with that in mind, all right? There were a couple of gematrias that I said last week. The way that gematria works is that the numerical equivalent of every letter can be added up in the word, and certain words equal the numerical equivalent of other words, which tells you a deeper idea of that word. So famously, if we're coming up to Purim, one of the most famous gematrias is the gematria of Amalek. Amalek is the sworn enemy of the Jewish people, but what they're really here to do in this world is create Safek, which means doubt, right? That's what Amalek's whole job is, and therefore the numerical equivalent of Amalek is Safek. Now, if you want to stay on Purim stuff, so this is really, really cool. So there's a famous saying in the Talmud that says that a person, one of the most important mitzvahs of Purim, is to get so drunk that you cannot tell the difference between what's the language? There's Baruch Mordechai v'Arur Haman. right? Baruch Mordechai, blessed is Mordechai, and cursed is Haman. You have to get so drunk that you can't tell the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. Now, there are a lot of opinions as to how drunk you actually have to be, right? There's one very interesting opinion. There's one very interesting opinion which says that what that really means is that you have to get drunk enough that you can't do the math. What's the numerical equivalent of Baruch Mordechai, and what's the numerical equivalent of Arur Haman? If you wanted to sit there and hash that out in your brain, you would find that the numerical equivalent of Baruch Mordechai is exactly the same as Arur Haman. Which is very interesting.
So you just don't get drunk.
Well, I can do math when I'm drunk. I don't know about you. But that's the...
You're supposed to not get drunk at all because they're the same thing.
Yeah, no, that you...
So you can't tell the difference.
No, but you have to be able to, until you can no longer add up.
But you know they're the same.
You have to be able to do the maths. You have to be able to do the maths.
Before you start.
Okay? So that's a very beautiful, deep idea that these two things somehow relate to each other. Okay. Now, last week I told you a couple of others. There's a very, very beautiful one which Rachel really liked, which is that the Shema, which is the ultimate mission statement of the Jewish people. We say it every morning, every evening before we go to sleep, and you're supposed to say it right before you die. It is the true reminder of the Jewish people that, first of all, that we have a relationship with God, Hashem Elokeinu, God, the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-pervasive God, who is beyond all of existence, is Eloheinu, is our God, right? We have a personal relationship, and also Hashem Echad, that He is one. He is a total unity. There isn't the God of light and the God of darkness. There isn't the Zeus and Athena. There's just one. However, we can see how fundamental this statement is by its gematria, that the first two words in the Torah, Bereshit bara, in the beginning God created, happen to equal Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, which is pretty interesting. Very first two words in the Torah. Now the first three words in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created, within the first three words of the Torah you find all three sections of the written Torah. Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Right? The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Right? The Torah is the 5 books of Moses. The Nevi'im is the prophets, Habakkuk and Amos and Yechezkel and Yeshaya. And then the writings is Tehillim and Mishlei and Daniel and the Megillas and all that stuff, right? So the numerical equivalent of Bereshit bara Elokim is the numerical equivalent of the words Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. Pretty cool. Which goes to a deeper idea, which are those who say that the Torah is a fractal. I've spoken about this before a little bit. The idea of a fractal is a pattern where the larger pattern can be represented in a small piece of the pattern, which can be represented in an even smaller piece of the pattern. So as an example, in nature, right, if you look at a tree and then you look at a branch, the branch kind of looks like a microcosm of the tree. And then if you look at a leaf, the veins of the leaf kind of look like a microcosm of the branch. And if you want to read more about that, you can go look up Mandelbrot, and he talks all about fractals. Okay. Now they say that the Torah is fractilic. So one time the Vilna Gaon, the great genius of Vilna in the late 18th century, said that the entire 5 books of Moses is found in the first book, and the entire first book of Moses is found in the first chapter, and the first chapter of Moses of the Torah is found in the first verse, and the first verse found in the first word, and then and the whole thing is found in the little point there, right? So he says that the entire Torah can be found in the first word of the Torah, right? So he says that everything in the Torah can be found in the word Bereshit. Everything, right? Which, by the way, if you pick up books like Egrita Kala and the whole Tikkunei Zohar is really just a commentary on the first word of the Torah. It's a very, very deep idea. So one of his students was a little bit cheeky, and he said, "You can find anything in the Torah?" He said, "Anything? Yes." He said, "Okay, so where is the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the firstborn? Where would you find that in the Torah, in the first word of the Torah?" So without skipping a beat, the Vilna Gaon, because he was the Vilna Gaon, he says, okay, if you have the words Bereshit, so Ben Rishon Acher Shloshim Yom Tifteh, first son after 30 days you will redeem. Bereshit. It's like, wow, okay, that was pretty quick. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So that's how you can find some of the deepest and most fundamental parts of the Torah right in the very beginning of the Torah. Okay, now I have a few more gematrias which I've written down for you because I just wanted to remember them. Some of these are my favorites, okay? So let's go for it. All right. Baruch Mordechai Ar Haman. Okay, now here's a very beautiful one for those men in the room who have ever done, who sanctified the new moon, right? So after Rosh Chodesh, after you sanctify the new moon, you go out on Motzi Shabbos and you start dancing around and stuff, and it's pretty weird, right? But one of the things that you say is David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. David Melech Yisrael, right? David, the king of Israel, is alive and still going, right? The idea being that David represents the moon. In many, many ways, he represents the moon. He represented as the deep emotional part of, he really represented the heart of the Jewish people, which is why he wrote Tehillim, which is all the emotional poetry. He represents this waxing and waning of what the moon really represents, okay? That's why we say that. Interesting happens to be that the words David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam are the same gematria as the word Rosh Chodesh, which is cool. I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, next one. We said this, I mentioned this last week, but the word Torah, which is the gematria of, what's the gematria of Torah?
611.
611, right? We're so close. We almost got to 613, right? 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, right? Now the Talmud actually explains why Torah is 611, not 613. The reason why is because the first two mitzvahs God spoke, and then the rest we were given in the Torah, right? God spoke the first two of the commandments, I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other God besides me. But after that, the Jews said, no more, no more. Moses, you just tell us the rest. But okay, in the Torah, Torah is the gematria of 611. But the Torah, of course, is synonymous with what it means to be a good human being, which is why the Torah is the same gematria as Gemilut Chasadim, which means acts of kindness, right? Gemilut Chasadim. In addition, there is a Talmudic saying from Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had this famous phrase, which was, Kol man da'avid rachmana latav avid. Everything that God does is for the good. There's this famous story where Rabbi Akiva is camping. He tries to go to this town, and there's nowhere for him to stay in the entire town. And it's late at night, and he goes out to the outskirts of the city, and he's got his lamp, and he's got his rooster, and he's got his donkey. Okay? That's how he's traveling. He packs pretty light, right? What happens? First, the wind blows out his lamp. He's like, don't worry, whatever God does is for the good, okay? Then a fox comes and eats his chicken, right? Okay, don't worry, whatever God does is for the good. Then guess what happens? A lion comes and eats his donkey, okay? As one does, right? As does happen. You know, it's interesting. Lions were very common in Israel until...
Did the Ottomans kill them?
I think it was the Crusaders killed most of them. I think, but maybe
It was hippos, crocodiles.
there were everything. Yeah, there were lots of animals that were killed up until the 19th, 20th century. So there used to be a lot of lions in Israel. They no longer exist. Okay, Rabbi Akiva is sitting there in the dark, freezing cold, with no animal, no food, no nothing, right? Kol man da'avid rachmana latav avid. Okay, he wakes up in the morning and he comes down into the town. Turns out what had happened was an entire marauding band came through the town, killed everyone and kidnapped the rest, right? And because the light was off, and because his rooster didn't make any noise, and because his donkey didn't bray, Rabbi Akiva was saved. Okay, so that's, now, Kol man da'avid rachmana latav avid, everything that God does is for the good, is the gematria of 611, which is the Torah. It's interesting. Now, if we were to go into the word, okay, now we know that 613 is a very interesting number. Is this interesting to you guys? Should I keep going? All right. I feel like, I'm going to say it again, though. By the way, I'll just say, don't be like turned off if this stuff doesn't get to you. Like, for some people, they find this very cool. For other people, they're like, okay, new. Tell me something, tell me some, like a deep idea. I'd much prefer a deep idea, right? I also prefer deep ideas, but I also think this is cool, too. All right. So we know that the number 613 is a significant one. There are 613 mitzvahs in the entire Torah, right? It also happens to be, once upon a time, there was a man who told me that there are an unbelievable number of prime numbers whose digits add up to 10. that are significant numbers in the Torah, right? So 613 is an example of one, right? 6 plus 1 plus 3 equals 10. 73 is the gematria of Chachma, which equals 10. 207 is the gematria of Rivka. There's a whole bunch of them, okay? What? 217, excuse me. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, but let's get to 613. There's a few places where you can actually see the words 613 in the Torah. So, if you were to take out a Chumash, right? If you were to take out a Chumash, you'd look at the very beginning of Bereshit, and it would say the first thing God creates is light. God created light, right? Now, this light is not like physical light. It's this deep, supernal, spiritual light, right? So it says God saw the light, et haor, right? The light, et haor. What is the gematria of et haor? Why don't you give me a guess? 613, right? Because the real light that we're talking about is Torah. Okay? If you come to synagogue any time in the month of Elul, right, the month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, as well as during a lot of the month of Tishrei, you will say a famous Tehillim, right? A verse of Psalms. It says, LeDavid Hashem Uri V'yishi, right? For an entire month, we're saying this in the preparation leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It says, by David, God, you are my light and my salvation. Uri V'yishi, my light and my salvation. Guess what gematria Uri V'yishi adds up to? 613. Okay, and we'll do one more for you. I feel like like in a cheap way. I feel like I'm doing party tricks for you guys. But okay, if you can give me one more sheet of paper, this is terrible for the environment. Next, I would really love a whiteboard. Like I just don't have one. So, the intention's there. All right, so now, there is an interesting thing that you can sometimes do with what's called the miluim of a word, which means that every word is comprised of letters, but those letters can actually be spelled out, right? So Aleph is Aleph Lamed Pei, right? So if you were to take the miluim of the word mitzvot, okay? So you have the word mitzvot. How do you spell mem? How do you spell
Mem, Aleph, Mem.
mem? Mem. Okay. Then how do you spell tzadi?
Sadi Dalad Yud.
Good. Tzadi dalid yud. Okay. How do you spell vav? It's a vav aleph vav actually. Vav is this vav is with an aleph. Okay. And then a tuf is tuf yud vav. Tav. Yeah? Okay. Now, how many guesses do you want to give as to what these letters all add up to? 613. So if you were to literally, square, right? If you were to spell out all of the entire, what mitzvahs actually are in a three-dimensional way, you get 613, okay? So there's a lot of things you can do with this. It's all very nice. It's all very good.
Did you say squaring, like
A square?
square, like
Square.
like a calculation?
Well, what I mean is, yes, if you expand out, right, into the the greater dimension, if you were to flesh out each letter, then that's what it would add up to. Okay, so I think that I'm gonna stop there. Again, there are so many of these gematrias. There's so many beautiful ones, and usually what they do is the best way to use a gematria is once you've demonstrated an idea logically. Usually, what ends up happening is you say, and how can I see that demonstrated in the words themselves? Is usually there's a gematria that goes along with it, right? And that's what we're saying here, is that this gematria it's the icing on the cake. It's the thing that shows you the beauty that's expressed, not just in the ideas, but in the words and the letters themselves. There is a beauty, there's a harmony that's expressed not just in the mind, but also in the physical form of the way that we speak. And I think that's what's so beautiful about really all of Torah, is that so much of what we do is not meant to remain mental. It's not meant to just stay theoretical. It's supposed to be really fleshed out and really practiced and really lived and really embodied. And And so this is just one way of demonstrating that. Okay, yeah, thanks very much. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for listening.